I was living in an old post-war house. It was built by German prisoners a few years after the end of the war. The house is small. Only 2 entrances and 3 floors. It was built on the conscience. And if it were not for the dilapidation of communal workers, it would still be in excellent condition. Our house also has a basement. A luxury by today's standards. Each of the 18 apartments in this basement is allocated a separate room. This basement is what we're going to talk about. Our basement was notable for the fact that it periodically turned into a swamp, an impenetrable marsh that emitted such odors that it was nauseating to even walk past it, let alone go inside. Every time the utility workers did something and the odors disappeared for a while. Although, if you ask any of the residents of the house, no one has ever seen these utilities workers. However, the work was done. The second attraction of our basement is that it has 19 rooms. Not counting the corridor, it is not known why the German builders built one more extra room, thus taking away space from 2 neighboring rooms. The door to the extra room, I must say, was a good one. An iron door, 2 fingers thick, rusted in some places. It never locked, and it was always bouncing and slamming against the walls, which always made me shudder. It was hard to explain this behavior. Indeed, how could a draft so strong in an insulated room play such a massive door like a light plywood? Several times the neighbors wanted to go and find out where the draft was coming from, but their enthusiasm waned every time they approached the door. Perhaps it was the smell. The odor from the 19th room was particularly vile. Apparently, repairing the sewage system in this room was not part of the Housing and Utilities Department's duties. Or perhaps it was the door itself, which I didn't want to touch. It wasn't just any door. It had metal rivets in the shape of a circle, painted white in the corners and in the center. The paint should have worn off over time, but it looked like someone was constantly refreshing it. There was another reason why people didn't want to go scouting: an oppressive sense of danger, of fear. It consumed a person when he took a couple of steps beyond the threshold of room 19. The fear that if he took a few more steps, the door would slam shut behind him with a thud and would never open again. That's how we lived. Bypassing the damn room on the opposite wall of the corridor, we had a regular drunkard living in our house. Everyone called him Uncle Fedya. He was not a mean, spirited guy. Such people, when they drink, have an uncontrollable passion to do something. During one of these impulses, Uncle Fedya decided to put a big barn lock on the door, just to be sure. He even managed to get some welding to weld the massive hinges to the door. I must say that he did his job perfectly, but as it turned out later, he didn't have the key to the lock. But we turned a blind eye to that because obviously no one wanted to go in there. The tenants breathed a sigh of relief. Now it was possible to go down into the cellar without fear. That's what I did one winter Friday evening. Wishing to please myself with a jar of pickles saved from the summer, I opened the cellar door and started down the stairs, having turned on the light in the corridor beforehand. As I descended, I noticed the bulb flickering, threatening to leave me in total darkness in a few minutes. I shivered and decided to hurry up. As I walked past Dr. 19, I heard somewhere in the distance, clearly outside the house, some unintelligible sounds, as if someone was moving something very heavy across the floor. After a few moments, the sound stopped. Without giving it much thought, I went further into my cellar. When I got to it and opened it with the key, I started going through the jars, hoping to find at least one with tomatoes. And so it took me so long that I fell out of reality a bit and woke up only after a few minutes, having not found tomatoes and deciding to enjoy the cucumbers. As I turned around and was about to walk out of my basement into the common hallway, I froze. I heard a rustle. No, not a rustle. It was barely audible, thudding against something heavy. It was as if someone had seen an obstacle that had never been there before and was trying to figure out how best to remove it. I stood like that, hugging a jar of cucumbers and afraid to move. I was absolutely sure that the sound was coming from the very room 19 that Uncle Fedya had walled up the day before. I stood like that for a few minutes. For me, it was like a few hours. The sounds grew louder and louder, the blows on the door from the other side more fierce and impatient. I cursed myself for my indecision. I should have run as soon as I heard the first bang to get out of the bloody cellar, out of this burial ground where the Germans had buried something that now wanted to get out, obviously not for the first time. The blows were joined by a scraping sound. Something was clawing at the iron of the door in impotent anger. If only the door would hold. If only this drunkard had done his job properly, was the thought that filled my mind. After all, if this creature gets free, it will obviously guess from the light on that there is someone in the basement. Suddenly, the sound stopped. Did the creature realize the obstacle was insurmountable, or did it just decide to rest? I realized I wouldn't get a second chance. I put the jar on the shelf as quietly as possible and prepared to live out the worst moments of my life. Quietly walking out into the hallway and closing the door behind me, I turned to face the exit. My basement is at the farthest end of this underground floor. To get out of it upstairs, you have to first walk 5 meters down the corridor, turn the corner, walk another 20 meters, go into the vestibule and up the stairs. Just at the second 20-meter stretch was the damned extra basement. The lights were very dim. Apparently a few of the bulbs had burned out, and a couple more were burning very timidly, threatening to go out at any second. I tiptoed through the first 5-meter stretch and stopped, gathering my wits. What to do next? To run these 20 meters, making a lot of noise, or to carefully sneak along the wall, making a minimum of sound. I decided to go for the second option, at least until there was a clear danger. The first meters I walked quite confidently, and even decided to speed up a bit. I was about 3 meters away from the 19th door when I heard a new sound, after which my knees shook, and I had to slide down the wall to the floor to avoid falling. I sat like that for a few seconds, and then, in spite of everything, I rushed with all my might past the damn door, soared up the stairs, went up to my house, took my phone, and went to a friend's house for the night. Now, when I analyze that incident, it's hard for me to say what scared me more, the sound of tearing earth mixed with tapping on concrete, or the disgusting paw that stuck out from under the door, covered in green, pus-colored slime, with 6 fingers with claws sticking out of them like nails with bitten off caps. Several years passed. They decided to build new buildings in our neighborhood, for it was almost the center of the city. Our house was demolished. The tenants were resettled, however, according to some norms. Before demolition, it is necessary to check absolutely all rooms of the house, including the basement. There was nothing to do. I had to go down into the basement. As it was told later, a group of 5 strong men refused for a long time, having torn the lock off the 19th cellar. They said that there was no reason to go there, because there was obviously no one there. However, the threats of the bosses forced 2 men to go there. They found nothing except a disgusting smell, A mess of sewage waste, some rotten rags and decay, unless you counted some obscure tunnel in the wall, from which there was a draft and the smell of a burial ground. The tunnel went downward at an angle, so they decided to fill it with a special mixture and forget about it, writing off its presence as a mistake of the house designers.